Hey, everybody. Welcome and come on in to tonight's parenting tip where I'm going to talk to you about how to set and maintain boundaries with your kids without feeling guilty. Come on in. Welcome to this parenting tip. If you are joining me live, a couple of housekeeping things. If you could, right above my head, there should be a link that says streamyard.com/Facebook. If you could click that link, that allows the StreamYard platform to connect with Facebook. And then when we comment and engage, I'll be able to see who's joining me. And I won't see a little bubble head. I'll actually be able to see your name. And as you come on in, give me #live in your comments. Let me know that you are here, where you're coming in from. That would be great. And I'm so looking forward to what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight on how to set and maintain boundaries without feeling guilty. So if you're here live, give me in the comments #live. And if you are joining me on the replay, just comment #replay, and I will know that you are here, and I'll be able to engage with you as you watch on replay. So tonight we're going to be talking about how to set and maintain boundaries without feeling the guilt. And so first thing I just want to ask you about when it comes to boundaries is, oh, hey, I'm glad you're here live from New Jersey. And yeah, if you could click that link above me that says streamyard.com/Facebook, that allows me to actually see your profile, because right now, unfortunately, this is what I see where it says Facebook user. And I don't know your name, and I'd really like to engage with you because I want this to kind of be an application, interactive session. So if you're able to do that and comment and let me know that you are here, and we're actually you're joining from New Jersey, so that may be Susan, but this is just what I'm seeing. So if you're able to click that link above, streamyard.com/Facebook, and then comment again, then I'm able to connect with you. So talking about boundaries, this is what we want to talk about tonight. How can we set and maintain boundaries without feeling the guilt? And so many parents that I engage with, whether I'm coaching them or I'm engaging with them in various Facebook groups, I really feel the frustration of not only setting boundaries, what are the boundaries that I need to set, but following through on the boundaries. Because why? Because we start to feel a little bit guilty. Our kids are angry with us. It's not, oh, we've pressed and nothing's happening. Well, I'm sorry that is happening. I am not sure whether I can fix that for you. So if that is the case, I'm not quite sure why that is going on. If you could, when you comment, if you could just give me your name, then at least I can communicate with you by name, because I like to be able to speak to everybody and not just, do it from a general perspective. So let's see if I can get that going. And please bear with me here as I go in and see if I can't get something else going for you. Sorry about that. Parent by design. So right above my head, if you are able to open up, I think the copy is up there of how to join the group. And then it actually says I'm going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment, please grant StreamYard now, Shelly, all right, great. I'm glad you're here. Thank you. And Susan, I'm glad that you're here too. So anyway, we will do our best to get through this if that link is not working tonight. So anyway, as we're doing this, I want to be able to engage with you. I want to work with you. I want to coach you through how we can set and maintain boundaries. So the first thing I want to ask you when it comes to boundaries is, what are boundaries? What does that mean to you? So put that in the comments for me. What are boundaries? What do you perceive are boundaries? Because some people have different perceptions of what they feel a boundary is. So let me know what you perceive a boundary to be. Put that in the comments for me. And so Susan, I'm glad that you're here joining me. And Shelly, I'm glad that you're here joining me as well. And limits, good one. Yes, limits. What else? What else do you perceive boundaries to be? Boundaries to be. What do you perceive boundaries to be? Put that in the comments for me. I agree, it's limits. Anything else? Anything else? Rules and limits, agree. I agree. Rules and limits. House rules, I used to call them, house rules. Anybody else? What else do you perceive boundaries to be? Limits is good. Rules are good. I agree with both of those. But when we look at boundaries, boundaries can actually be defined as the limits, as you were saying here, that we set with other people. which indicate what we find acceptable or unacceptable in their behavior towards us or with us. Okay, so boundaries can be defined. Boundaries can be defined as the limits we set with people based on what we feel is acceptable or unacceptable in their behavior towards us. So I agree. Yes, responsibilities in life, right? Responsibilities in life. I agree. That's a good one too. Very good. Oh, I'm so bummed out that I can't really see you by name. If you're able to type your name in first, then at least I can acknowledge you in our conversation, because I really wanted to keep this interactive. If that link is not working, StreamYard.com/Facebook, frustrates me when technology doesn't cooperate, right? Doesn't it? So that's really what boundaries are, can be defined as the limits we set, the responsibilities in life. Absolutely. So why should we set boundaries? Let me know. Why should we set boundaries? Put that in the comments for me as well. Why do you feel as though we need to set boundaries? Because I know we talk about it all the time. I need to set boundaries. I need to, not let things happen. But why is it so important that we set boundaries? Because a lot of people that I work with and that I've talked to that are dealing with frustrations in their kids, and this is not a carte blanche thing with everybody, but it seems as though we got to a place of chaos in our relationships because we had not set boundaries prior to where we are today. So why is it so important for us to set boundaries? Why is it so important for us to set boundaries? If you can put them in the comments, that would be great. Let me know. Why is it so important to set boundaries? Because usually when it gets to the place where things are a little out of control, get to the point where I probably should have done something prior to this. Shelley says, it makes children feel safe and that parents are in control. I love that, Shelley. I love that. Facebook user here, I'm not quite sure who you are, but so kids have rules and structure. Totally agree. I totally agree. And I believe that, our children know how to act and respond in a way that disciplines their growth and development. Okay, so it just exactly as you were saying, why we set those boundaries, because setting boundaries and expectations for our kids, it assists them in building life skills that include patience, problem solving, being resourceful, responsibility, self-discipline, as we had talked about. And you may have heard me use this statement before, but I want you to remember this and jot this down if you want. But discipline, this isn't punishment. Discipline is a discipline of self-discipline. So when we are setting boundaries, what we're really doing is helping the child self-discipline in certain behaviors. And so, Susan, yes, to help them grow. I totally agree, right? To help them grow into being responsible young adults. So the next thing I want you to do in the comments is let me know, what areas do you feel we need to set boundaries in? Put that in the comments for me. What areas do you feel we need to set boundaries in? And this could be you personally, this could be in general, but what are some of the areas that we feel we probably need to have some boundaries? What are some of those areas? I will let you type this in because there's always a few seconds delay when you guys are typing in as compared to when I actually see it. But what are some of the areas? I know with some people, it can be around morning routine. My morning routine is chaos and I need to set some boundary or some house rules, okay? Sometimes it's the nighttime routine. It's, setting the boundaries about, what time we go to bed, what time technology gets put away. These are some of the areas that, you may feel as though you need to set boundaries. Maybe it's boundaries around chores, getting chores done, what we will allow and what we will not allow. Sometimes it is technology. Sometimes it's gaming. Sometimes it's school expectations. So what are some of the areas that you feel that you may need to set boundaries around? Okay. Responsibilities for their own actions, their own activities and preparation. Great. So what are some of the areas, because we're going to be doing this as a working session, that you feel as though we need to set boundaries, or you personally may need to set boundaries? Because I want to kind of coach you through some of this. Susan says time management, chores, and schoolwork. Excellent. Oh, Susan, you got it to work. Yay. That's what I like to see. Okay. Boy, it shows up a lot better when I can actually see your name. So Susan says, setting time around time management, chores, and schoolwork. So you'd like to set some boundaries around those areas. Anybody else? What are some of the other areas that you feel as though you may need to set boundaries with your kids? Because I want you to be able to walk away from this session having set some boundaries and some guidelines that you can actually start applying with your family, even tomorrow or later this evening. It's totally up to you. But what are some of the areas that you feel as though you need to set boundaries? Shelley is saying with electronics. Yes, Shelley, I hear that so much from parents, is that the boundaries on electronics is, if I don't set the boundaries, it's just mindless scrolling. And we find that if we tried to take the electronics away, that we start getting an attitude or backlash. So definitely something I'm hearing a lot of. So Susan is saying around time management, chores, and homework. And Shelley is saying around electronics. Any other areas as though you feel as though I need to probably set some boundaries with my kids? Anybody else here want to add some things in here? Because we can certainly begin working with those. Begin working with this. Jen. Oh, hi, Jen. How are you? Thanks for joining me tonight. Jen is also saying around electronics. So great. So these are some of the things that we can be working through as we're discussing this tonight. So we've got time management, chores, and electronics seems to be some areas that we feel as though we need to set some boundaries. So let's talk about how do we set the boundaries. So the first thing I want you to do is identify the areas you want to set the boundaries on. And some of you have already done this. So if you got a notebook or you want to jot some things down, let's start talking about these steps, because this is what I want to go into next. So you identify the boundaries that you want to set them around. Susan is saying time management, chores, schoolwork, and Shelley's saying electronics. Jen is feeling electronics. These are the areas that you want to set boundaries, okay? If you have not set boundaries before with your kids, the one thing that I do want to caution you on is don't try to set too many boundaries at once. It'll be too overwhelming. The kids are going to be overwhelmed. You'll probably be overwhelmed with trying to maintain them. I usually say 1 or 2 boundary areas to start. If you do any more than that, it's just going to be too overwhelming. And then before we start sitting down with the kids, I want you to think through, or if you are parenting with a partner, the areas that you would like to improve. So we get everybody on the same page with it. It is so important that if you are co-parenting or parenting with a partner, that you are both on the same page with the boundaries you want to set, why you want to set them. Because if not, if you are in a co-parenting situation, you know those kids are going to play between the two of you, right? So discuss with your partner the areas that you want to improve and why it is important to you. So we both get in the same page, okay? Why is it so important to you? You need to have those communications and then discuss what would you like the outcome to be or the expectation. So in other words, we're doing some pre-game planning, okay? Pre-game planning with your partner so you have the support on the same page. If you are parenting alone, you don't need to discuss it with anybody, but I still would like you to map out what are the boundaries you would like to set? What would you like to be the outcome to be, so that you at least have a direction of what you're doing and why it is important to you. Discuss what that outcome would like to be before we even go to the kids, okay? Then the next step I want you to do is plan a family meeting. Now, if you've worked with me at all, or you've listened to my tips before, any of my other trainings, you know I talk about the family meeting. This does not necessarily have to be a formal family meeting where we say, all right, everybody get together, we're going to have a family meeting. Because if you have teenagers, they're going to be like, I ain't showing up at your meeting, okay? So we just have to kind of stage it where we have everybody together so we can have our meeting, but just in an informal way. Okay. Some kids, like I said, especially the older kids, are going to be like running for the hills. I am not showing up at your meeting, but just plan on bringing up the discussion when everyone is available and we're in a relaxed mood. And, a lot of times I recommend doing something fun. So, maybe we're doing Taco Tuesday and we have a taco bar and everybody's in the kitchen and we're sitting around and eating. Or, another fun thing is what I call Sunday, you know what I mean? Where we're just going to make ice cream sundaes. So you bring out the ice cream and all the different toppings and everybody comes, because if you feed them, they will come, right? So if we're doing that, everybody is in together, we're in more of a relaxed mood, and then start out like this. Now, you want to jot this down. This is totally up to you. I'm going to just try and give you some phrasing, and this is just on the QT here. I am so glad we are all together here. Dad and I have been thinking about some things that I wanted to run past you guys. Did you get that? Okay, jot that down. Dad and I've been thinking about some things that I wanted to run past you. You know, we tend to have some challenges around, and let me go back to some of the things that you guys were mentioning. We tend to have some challenges around, well, let's go with the electronics, okay? I know we tend to have some challenges around electronics. You fill in that blank, all right? Whatever it is, whether it was the homework, whether it's curfew, whatever it is. You know, we tend to be having some challenges around electronics. I was hoping we'd be able to work this out. Do you see how we're doing? I'm doing this kind of as a casual conversation, okay? I was hoping we'd be able to work this out. Then I want you to open the floor to their ideas. I know we really tend to be arguing over how much time, and then when I asked you to put it away, that we end up in an argument. What may be a better way for us to handle this? So what we're doing is we are bringing up that we know we have conflict. They know we have conflict. They've been in the conflict with us, right? What may be a better way to handle this? And what we're doing is we are giving it back to them. Get them started and give them a voice instead of us telling them, this is the expectation and this is what you're going to do, okay? And you still get the final say. You're still the parents. We're going to get to that. But get them started and give them a voice instead of us telling them this is what's going to happen. So what may be a better way for us to handle this? Do you see how I'm doing this in a conversation and empathetic tone? Okay, so get them started first. If they don't have a suggestion, because some of them may not have any suggestions or ideas, ask permission. If they say, I don't know, Mom, I'm just really tired of, this and that. And why can't I just have my, my phone whenever I want? Or why do I need to plug it in at night? Or whatever it is that they tend to be frustrated with. But if they don't have any suggestions on how to work it out, this is when you ask permission to share. Would it be okay if I made a suggestion? Would it be okay if I make a suggestion? Now, the reason why we ask permission instead of telling, because when we ask permission, would it be okay if I make a suggestion? Most kids will say, okay, and then they are more apt to receive what we're saying than coming down for a family meeting and say, I am sick and tired of fighting over the electronics. Every time I ask you to plug it in, you're not plugging it in. You're sneaking it into the bedroom when you know you're not supposed to. And do you see automatically that wall is going up? So what I'm trying to do is create a dialogue where our kids actually have a voice. So when you ask them, how do you think we can better work this out? They may have some suggestions, and we can start the dialogue. If they don't have any suggestions, then you can ask permission to share. Would it be okay if I made a suggestion? So when we ask that permission to share, they seem to be more apt to receive, and then share your idea for that boundary. All right. So let's go back to the example we were talking about with the electronics. So, I know, we've been really arguing over the electronics, and I feel as though, you're just on there for hours and hours and hours. And, we just feel as though we're fighting over the time. If you've already set a boundary that they have X amount of hours a day or whatever it is that your boundary is. Remember, I said you need to be proactive with that. Know what your outcome wants to be. How can we best handle it? They don't know. And say, is it possible that we have given a limit on the electronics, that when we do ask that we can just comply with the time limit? Is 3 hours a day okay with you? Mom, 3 hours, that's not a lot of time, Mom, that's not a lot of time. Well, what would you propose? Well, why do I have to have any limits? Because I think we do need to have some limits, because if not, other things aren't getting done. So what do you think would be fair? Do you see how we're having a conversation? What do you think would be fair? We're starting a dialogue, so not a monologue. See if you can negotiate the agreement that you can all live with. Now, remember, you are still the parent. You still get the final say. You still get the final say, yes. And if they say no, when you ask permission, Susan, we have the same son, right? We have the same son. And I know we've talked about that. When I've asked Kyle permission and he just says no, and say, well, I really would just prefer if we weren't in arguing. So would it be okay if I just made a suggestion? This is where we really need to start this. And Susan, I totally get it, because I know with Kyle, and he's your only. I had other kids at the table, right? I had other kids at the table, and most of them, because we were a blended family, so we had a lot of kids, and we really needed to run a tight ship. Most of them were okay to dialogue. And so when we have that, it was really a great conversation. We were all sitting and sharing, because they all knew that we had rules. We all knew the kids who weren't going to, maintain the rules, and that we just really needed to get back on the same page. And Susan, I know we're working together, and I know we're going to break through, the challenge that you're having with your son. But if we do this in a conversational tone, I have found that when we are in conversation, we are doing a dialogue and not a monologue, they are more apt to share. So see if you can negotiate an agreement that we can live with. And so maybe with the electronics is there needs to be a time limit. Maybe it's so many hours a day. Maybe we are negotiating a time in which the electronics are done and we are done for the night. So maybe, all the electronics are going down at, let's say, 8:30, 9 o'clock. You set the time. I think, we need to shut these electronics down at a certain time so you can be getting better rest. I think they should be, shut down at 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. Oh my gosh, Mom, that's way too early. 8 o'clock. And they say, well, what would you prefer? Well, how about 10 o'clock? Why can't I just do 10 o'clock? 10 o'clock is late. Like, you need to be getting in bed. You need to be able to kind of decompress from the screens. So how about 8:30? 8:30, oh my gosh, 8:30 is so early. So maybe you negotiate until you get it to an 8:30 or a 9 o'clock. But my goal is to come to an agreement that you can both live with. Now, remember, you are still the parent and get the final say. But if we are starting the dialogue, not the monologue, asking them what they would like, what they would prefer, and then being able to negotiate what we can do to be able to find that common ground. Before we leave the table, we've had an agreement. Okay, then confirm what you agreed upon by repeating the expectation and asking, will that be okay with you? Okay, so we've decided that all the electronics are going to be plugged in the kitchen. I don't know, whatever your boundary is. It's going to be plugged in the kitchen at 9 o'clock at night. Is that okay with you? Do you see what I'm doing? I'm asking, this is what we agreed upon. Will that be okay with you? All right. Then we need to ask about the consequences if the boundary is breached. So that was what we talked about on how we set the boundary. Now, what do we do if the boundary is breached? So again, we put it out on the table. So what do you think the consequences should be if you violate the boundary? Again, we're going to ask, and then we just want to listen. Now, because we had multiple kids in our home, I found that my kids would usually come up with a harsher consequence because they wanted the other kids to get in trouble, all right? And if it was a harsher consequence, I could always walk it back and look like the hero. But remember, the consequence needs to fit the crime. We cannot ground or restrict for everything unless it was the source or the reason for violating the boundary. So let me give you an example on that. If our kids are not getting up and getting ready for school on time, and I know some parents just have some challenges getting their kids out the door, bedtime may need to be adjusted a little bit earlier so they can get rest, get up and get ready. Maybe we got chores are not getting done. Okay, so maybe we need to have no digital time until the chores are complete. So again, we need to have some consequences. So if chores are not getting done, then we're going to shut down the electronics until the chores are complete, and then you can have the electronics back. If kids aren't getting up and getting ready for school, the consequence is you probably need to go to bed earlier so that you can get up on time. So do you see how the consequence needs to fit the time? If they don't turn the phone in when they're supposed to, plug it in at 9 o'clock, and they're showing up at 9:30, tomorrow night, maybe it needs to be turned in 30 minutes earlier. But we are discussing this by giving them a voice at the table. When they've discussed what they feel the consequence is and they know it in advance, they are not blindsided when they have breached the boundary. And they're more apt to be agreeable because we actually gave them a voice at the table to discuss what the boundary should be, what the consequences should be. And before the meeting is over, again, we just need to confirm the boundary. and confirm the consequence. Confirm the boundary, infirm the consequence. Does anybody have any questions on this so far? Because what we just talked about is how we set the boundaries through the family meeting, allowing them to have a voice at the table, finding something we can both agree on, finding that middle ground, again, giving them a voice at the table, finding a common area that we can both agree with, reinstating what we agreed the boundary would be, asking, what do you think the consequence should be if the boundary is breached? Dialogue what they think that should be. When we are done, we have an opportunity to just confirm. So we've agreed the phones are going to be turned in at 9 o'clock. If you do not turn the phone in at 9 o'clock and it's later than that, then tomorrow night it will need to be 8:30. Are we clear on this? Cool. Cool. Okay. So anybody have any questions on that so far? I'll give a moment to see if anybody has any questions before we go into the next part of this tip. And that's how do we maintain these boundaries, right? How do we maintain the boundaries? So if that comes up, I can get back to that, but let's go into the next thing. So let's look at some tips on how to maintain the boundaries. Okay. The expectation should be clear, because we all agreed. We've had this conversation. We discussed what it would be. We don't want to be in the conflict anymore. So what we want to be doing next is we want to start affirming the behavior when we see it. Okay. So maybe if you were setting boundaries around chores and electronics, and that tends to be a challenge with some people. Maybe when you see your kid takes out the trash, because they're not getting their electronics back until they take out the trash, okay? You can just say, thank you for taking out the trash, or thank you for being ready for school on time, or thank you for turning in your phone on time. So in other words, when you start seeing them doing the things that you have asked, okay, thank them. It's the reinforcing of the positive and not just harping on the negative, Now, if you get some resistance and things start to unravel, and I'm telling you, it will. It did in my house. We had multiple kids. Things would start to unravel. Then we need to kind of bring it back to the table. Bring it back in an informal meeting. It's kind of like a reset meeting. This is what happened. I noticed that we get a little lax on certain things. I'd really like to get it back on track. Would that be okay with you? And just reiterate what the boundary is. The phone needs to be turned in at 9 o'clock. You can pick it up after you're ready for school in the morning. Whatever it is, we might need to have a reset. It's totally fine. It's typical. But rather than be harsh when you start to see the things unravel, this is when we just bring it back to a meeting and just discuss this is what's going on. And maybe they can explain to you why. Maybe they want to reset the boundary again. But what we're doing is we are having a dialogue and not a monologue. We are allowing them to be part of the solution and not just feel as though they are the problem. And also remind them what that agreement was. You can always neutralize that arguing if they want to argue about what that is with a one-liner. You know what I say? I love you too much to argue. I love you too much to argue. So Susan says, I get the consequence fits the crime, but not doing schoolwork has school consequence. What is appropriate for home consequence? Great question. I don't know if anybody else has dealt with that. So Susan, I have had to deal with the same thing when it came around school, not with all my kids, but you know the one I'm talking about, okay? And the logical consequence was, if he gets the zero, he gets the zero. If he fails the class, he can either earn the money to take correspondence or he will graduate late. They were just some things that I had to lay out that you still get to choose and choose wisely. Okay, and choose wisely. The home consequence for schoolwork not getting done is, Susan, let me just ask you, what may be in the way of getting the schoolwork done? Is it the technology? Is it that they're in their room scrolling and they're not doing their work? Because if that's the case, then maybe we need to hold on the electronics until the work is complete. So I don't know about you or how your school is run, but I know most schools now do have an opportunity for the parents to kind of check in and monitor progress and things that are going on. These are things that we can have conversations. I know your son is older. He doesn't necessarily want you checking on his stuff all the time. But if we find that schoolwork is happening and you want a consequence at home, then maybe we need to take away the distraction. If the distraction was technology, maybe we need to withdraw the technology until the grades come back. I don't know if that is helpful for you, but again, it's finding what has been in the way that is keeping this child from being successful in that area. So let me know if you think that is helpful to you. So tips to maintaining the boundaries, okay? Bringing it back up in an informal meeting and resetting if we need to, reminding them what we had agreed to, and then neutralizing the arguing with a one sentence, with that one liner, you know, that I love you too much to argue, because we had discussed this. It's okay to dialogue it. It doesn't need to be an argument. I have found that when I am in a conversational tone and having a conversation with my kids, they may want to get defensive. Why? Because we are setting a boundary. They feel it is restricting. They are going to say that it's controlling. These are some of the things we're going to hear, especially from our teens. But these are boundaries, as I said, that help to discipline. Discipline is a discipline of self-discipline. And so if we are finding that the technology and electronics, and a couple of you had mentioned that, you know, Jen did and Shelly did, you know, that electronics are a problem. When we see that our kids are able to get the other things done, then the electronics are not an issue. But if they are an issue, then we may need to set the boundary around the electronics. So let me ask you a question. I know I have a few people that are still online with me live here tonight. Do you feel that if you apply these strategies I shared with you tonight, that you would be able to set and maintain boundaries with your kids and not feel guilty? Let me know in the comments if you felt that this was helpful for you tonight. Oh, Shelly, great. Thank you. Shelly says, my kids say they need their phones to study. I have said they can use a computer instead or print off material from the phone. I guess that setting on a boundary in this situation and having them help set it. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So setting a boundary in this situation and having them work with it, because it is possible. I honestly, kids are using technology for their schoolwork more than ever, especially with the remote learning and everything else that's going on. And so again, we can have that dialogue, but at some point, if we see that they're not, then we need to have a consequence for that, because they say that they're doing their work and they're watching YouTube or TikTok videos, right? And I'm not, and that's where we have to just be honest with what's going on. We need that trust in our relationship with those kids to be able to do that. So they need their phones to study. They can use a computer or print it off from the phone. Setting a boundary in this situation and having them help set it. Yes. So Shelly, I think that would be the best thing to do, is just have that conversation. Like I said, if this is your point of contention, which is the electronics, this is where we have that dialogue. Okay. So again, do you think this was helpful? The strategies that I shared with you, to be able to set that. Jen says, my kids have been sticking to the boundaries with electronics. Well, good, Jen, I'm glad to hear that. And I'm glad to hear that. And so would you be able to share with us what boundary that you guys were able to establish and that they were able to agree with? If you'd be able to share that with us, that would be great. And Susan says, I don't feel guilty. I don't feel guilty. I'm getting him to have it. It's getting him to have the conversation. Yes, it is getting him to have that conversation. And we're going to talk more about that, because I know we're trying to break through his guardedness in his style. And Shelly, I'm glad that you found that this was helpful. So this is really the structure that I want you to be able to set up, whatever the boundary is. And look, as I said, there may be a number of areas. Maybe it's keeping the room clean. Maybe it's getting the chores done. Maybe it's the homework. There may be a number of things when you think about that. I wish I could just tighten some things up and get some compliance. And so just pick a couple of things to work on. Once we feel as though we have those boundaries set and everybody is compliant, because you know, sometimes we may get some resistance in the beginning, but if we stay firm, because we're not trying to do 5 at one time, we're just doing a couple. If we stay firm, everyone will start to come along. Things will get set. You'll be like a fine-tuned, well-oiled machine. This is just how we do it. And if there's another area, bring it up, and then let's set another boundary. And it's the same process. It's, hey, I had a couple of things that I wanted to run past you. I've noticed that maybe it's the laundry, you know, not getting the laundry done. I mean, we had multiple kids in our house, right? And so they were all doing their own laundry. But, you know, sometimes they'd leave it in the wash and not move it to the dryer, and somebody else needs to do their laundry, and someone else's stuff is in there. Like, we had to talk about what that looked like and set up some boundaries. So there are going to be things coming up, but it's the same process no matter what. Jen said, we agreed on the time that 10 o'clock, the electronics would be turned off. Bingo. And Jen, so they were compliant with that, right? We had that conversation, 10 o'clock it is. It was fair enough for everybody. You didn't have a problem with it. They didn't have a problem with it. It's a win-win for everybody. And when they have a voice at the table, when they've become part of the solution and not feel as though they are just the problem, you are going to get more compliance with that. You're going to get more compliance with that. Jen, how are you? It's good to see you here tonight. Good to see you here tonight. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. And so this is a cycle that you can continue with. So if you could for me tonight, what has been your biggest takeaway from what I shared on this topic this evening? If you could let me know in the comments, what has been your biggest takeaway from the structure that I gave you? What has been your biggest takeaway? If you could put that in the comments. Excellent. Susan, Jen's kids are 13 and 15, and she's got a 15-year-old as well. Yes. And both of you are coaching with the Parenting Blueprint. So I'm glad you guys have been able to connect here. That's awesome. That is awesome. But what was your biggest takeaway when it came to what I shared with you tonight? If you could tell me that in the comments. Was it the putting together the family meeting? Was it how we maintain? Was it putting together the consequences that fits the crime? What was your biggest takeaway from what I shared with you this evening? If you could share that with me. Yeah, consequence equals the crime. Good. Anybody else? What was your biggest takeaway? Yes. And Susan, I know sometimes it's just so easy for parents. It's like they always want to take the phone. They always want to, do certain things. But if it doesn't change the behavior, then it doesn't really fit the crime, right? If the technology has been the issue, then we need to take the phone away. Sometimes it was the gaming, the gaming was keeping them from getting homework done. And so then there was no gaming until the homework was complete. And so Jen says, all of it good, Jen, you actually had some good boundaries already set, but I just wanted you to understand the process of doing this and how we include the kids. Shelly says, setting boundaries will result in less arguing and hopefully less guilt for us parents and being tired of the nagging. I was so tired of the nagging. So tired of the nagging. Yes. And you like the Sunday? Yeah. Look, if you feed them, they will come. Sometimes it's just like, they smell the bacon cooking in the morning or something, you know what I mean? And all of a sudden they come out of their rooms. So I always felt with my kids anyway, if I was cooking up something, they were all starting to come out of their rooms because they wanted that. And so, and Shelly, I'm glad that you find that. And I totally agree that if we set the boundaries and the consequences in advance, then we don't have as much conflict when they violate it. Look, when my kids violated, and a lot of it was around the phone, when they violated the consequence and they were going to lose the privilege of the phone, all I had to do was put out my hand. We had already discussed this. So we don't have to have the conflict. Why? Because we sat at the table, they had a voice. This is something that they agreed to, and now we can work together. So anybody else have any big takeaways? Big takeaways. So I'm so glad that you were on with me live. Those of you who are on with me on a replay, please note with me, what was your biggest takeaway? And so what are our next steps? Okay. Now you know what you need to do. Okay. You can actually start putting together your plan, start setting up what you want to do in reference to setting your meeting up, how you want to phrase it. What are the areas that you want to talk about? And so those of you who are ready to go and implement this, comment, got it in the comments for me. This comment, got it in the comments. And as you are setting your boundaries and going through this process, post it in the Parent by Design Facebook group, because it really is helpful for parents to know how you are applying these strategies and the success you're getting, because it just really encourages them when people start to see this. Can I tell you, setting the boundaries and following through has been very difficult for a lot of parents. We don't want the conflict. We're tired of the fighting. Sometimes we just let it go because we don't want the arguing anymore. And the message that sends to our kids when we just let it go is it doesn't matter what I say, because there's not going to be a consequence. And so being intentional about what you're setting, what that expectation will be. Susan says, knowing the consequences ahead of time. Absolutely. I think that that's helpful. And whoever my Facebook user is, you got it. All right. So I am so excited. Post your success in the group. If anyone here, whether you are on live or you are watching on the replay, if you are feeling overwhelmed, just comment to me here, overwhelmed, okay? Because, there may be some challenges that you are finding personally in the process, okay? In the process and holding strong. And if you are feeling that way, send me a DM that just says boundaries, okay? I'll know that you are on the live, we're watching on the replay with me. Send me a message with a DM with the word boundaries, because maybe I can help you process through. Maybe we can jump on a call and talk about it, because I find with most parents, when it comes to making change and transformation, that we got to break our own parenting rules. We've been parenting a certain way for a long time. And that's, and honestly, breaking our own rules, because the rules that got us here are not going to get us there. Okay. And so this may be the time we need to start breaking our rules, breaking what I call the BS bubble in our heads, and sometimes that BS bubble is, you don't know my kids, nothing ever works. I've tried everything. My husband doesn't support me. I'm parenting alone. I am exhausted. These are the rules, the mindset that we have in our heads. And it's that mindset, that BS in our head, that may keep you from your success. Okay. So I know that this can be life-changing. It's going to reduce the conflict. You're not going to have so much anxiety over what's going on when you make those transformations. And so if you would like more help on how to apply these steps, what I'd like you to do is just send me a DM with the word boundaries, and we'll set up a time where we can talk about that so I can help you be successful. So I hope that you enjoyed this talk. This is something that I've really wanted to do and work with parents on a long time, because if we can set those boundaries in advance in a collaborative way with our kids, we will reduce that conflict. We will increase productivity and maintain positive relationships, which is the most important thing that we want to do in our parenting. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. And again, post your success stories in the Parent by Design group. Let other parents know how you are doing, what you're doing, so that they can be encouraged by your success as well. So hope you all have a great night, and I look forward to talking again soon. You are welcome, Susan. Take care. Bye-bye.